Gina woke up in the medical bay 3 days later. Her body ached everywhere, a deep exhaustion that seemed to reach her bones. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was or what had happened. Then it all came flooding back, the crucible. 72 hours. She had survived. "You're awake," a voice said. Nari sat in a chair beside the bed, looking tired but relieved. "About time. You've been asleep for almost 60 hours. Gina tried to sit up, but her body protested. Did I pass?" Nari's expression was complicated. "That's what everyone's arguing about. The Academy Board has been in meetings for 2 days straight. Half of them think you're a hero. The other half think you broke every rule in the book." "I completed the objectives," Gina said quietly. "Yeah, but not the way you were supposed to. You found loopholes in scenarios that weren't supposed to have loopholes. You made the simulation glitch. You turned a combat trial into a survival exercise." Nari leaned forward. "Gina, you didn't just pass or fail the crucible. You broke it." The door opened. Taemin rushed in, carrying a data tablet and looking frantic. "She's awake. I need to tell her before the judgment." "Gina, you need to know what's been happening." "Slow down," Gina said, her voice hoarse. Taemin took a breath. "Okay, so the crucible has detailed recordings of everything you did. Those recordings have been analyzed by every tactical instructor on the station. Some of them are calling your methods genius. Others are saying you cheated by refusing to engage with the scenarios as designed. Which side is winning?" "That's the thing, neither. Because Instructor Vorath hasn't given his judgment yet. And his opinion matters more than anyone else's. He's the one who has to officially pass or fail you." Gina felt her stomach tighten. Vorath had been certain she would fail. He had called the trial impossible for humans. What would he say now? "When does he announce his decision?" she asked. "In 1 hour," Taemin said. "In front of the entire academy. Everyone's going to be there." Gina closed her eyes. She had survived the crucible, but the real trial might just be beginning. The main assembly hall was packed. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls and in the aisles. Gina had never seen it so crowded. All 12 human cadets were there, sitting together in a block. Ambassador Do-Hyun Lim was present, representing Earth's government. Instructors from every department had gathered. Even cadets who had already graduated had returned to the station to witness the judgment. Gina walked to the center of the hall, still wearing medical support braces on her legs. Every step reminded her of what she had endured. Nari and Taemin walked beside her, a silent show of support. At the front of the hall, the Academy Board sat in a semicircle. 12 instructors from 12 different species. And standing before them, tall and imposing, was Instructor Vorath. The hall fell silent as Gina stopped before the board. Vorath's 3 eyes studied her, his expression unreadable. "Cadet Park Gina," the head of the board began. Her name was Instructor Talus, an ancient being whose species had been part of the coalition for thousands of years. "You attempted the crucible and survived 72 hours. This is unprecedented for a human. However, your methods during the trial have caused significant debate. Instructor Vorath has been reviewing your performance. He will now give his judgment." Vorath stepped forward. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. "Cadet Park," he began, his voice echoing through the space. "In my 47 years of service, I have trained warriors from every coalition species. I have seen champions, heroes, and legends pass through this academy. I have administered the crucible more than 300 times." He paused, letting the weight of his experience settle over the room. "When you asked to attempt the crucible, I told you it was impossible for a human. I believed this with certainty. I expected you to fail within hours. I was wrong." A murmur ran through the hall. Vorath continued. "I reviewed every moment of your trial. I analyzed every decision, every action, every solution you created. What I found surprised me." He looked directly at Gina. "You did not pass the crucible as it was designed. You did not follow standard tactical doctrine. You did not engage with scenarios in the expected manner." Gina felt her heart sink. This was it. He was going to fail her. "You did something else entirely," Vorath said. "You showed us that the crucible itself was limited by our own assumptions. We designed it for warriors who think like we think, who fight like we fight, who solve problems like we solve them. We never considered that there might be another way." He gestured to a holographic display that appeared above them. It showed footage from Gina's trial. "Here you avoided combat entirely by going under the wall instead of through the guards. Here you turned cargo supplies into improvised weapons. Here you found a third option in a scenario designed to have only two. Again and again, you refused to accept the parameters we set. You redefined what victory meant. Vorath's expression was intense as he addressed the full hall now. Not just Gina. For 400 years we have used the Crucible to identify the best warriors by our own standards. 89 cadets passed. All of them were strong in the ways we value. Fast, powerful, tactically trained in traditional doctrine. He turned back to Gina. But Cadet Park showed us a different kind of strength. The strength to persist when victory seems impossible. The strength to think beyond established rules. The strength to survive not through power but through adaptation. The hall was completely silent now. This is what humans bring to the coalition, Vorath continued. Not superior biology, not ancient warrior traditions, but the ability to find solutions where we see only impossibility. The galaxy is changing. We face new threats, new challenges. We need new ways of thinking. He stood at attention, his 6 arms crossed formally. Cadet Park Gina did not pass the Crucible as it was designed. She surpassed it. She showed us that our own test was too narrow. Therefore, my judgment is this. Cadet Park Gina has passed the Crucible with highest honors. Furthermore, I recommend that the trial be redesigned to incorporate what she has taught us. The hall erupted. Some species cheered. Others shouted objections. Humans were crying, hugging each other. Ambassador Do-Hyun Lim stood, a small smile on his face. Instructor Talus raised her hand and silence gradually returned. The board has reviewed Instructor Vorath's recommendation. We vote now. All in favor of passing Cadet Park? 10 hands rose. Only 2 abstained. The judgment is rendered, Talus announced. Cadet Park Gina has passed the Crucible. She graduates with elite honors and is hereby recognized as one of the Coalition's finest warriors. Taman was shouting, pumping his fist in the air. Nari had tears streaming down her face. The other human cadets were on their feet cheering, but Gina just stood there trying to process what had happened. She had done it. Not just for herself, but for every human who had been told they weren't good enough, weren't strong enough, didn't belong in this galaxy. After the ceremony, Vorath found her in the hallway. The crowds had dispersed, leaving them alone. Cadet Park, he said, I owe you an apology. I underestimated your species. You weren't wrong, sir, Gina said. Humans can't match most species physically. We are weaker and slower. But that is not all that matters, is it? Vorath studied her with what might have been respect. I have been thinking about what you did. You survived not by being stronger than the challenges, but by refusing to let them define the terms of engagement. This is a profound tactical insight. He pulled out a data tablet and handed it to her. These are records of other coalition trials. Tests designed for specific species with 0% success rates for outsiders. Naval command trials, strategic planning scenarios, advanced engineering challenges, all of them impossible for those not born to them. Gina looked at the list, then back at Vorath. Why are you showing me this? Because someone needs to prove they are not really impossible. Someone needs to show the coalition that our divisions and limitations are often of our own making. His 3 eyes met hers. Would you be interested in attempting them? Gina felt that familiar feeling rising in her chest. The same feeling she had when Vorath first called the Crucible impossible. The same feeling that had carried her through 72 hours of hell. She smiled. When do I start? 3 months later, Gina stood in front of a new classroom. She was no longer a cadet. She was an instructor, teaching adaptive tactics to both human and alien students. Taman worked with her, developing new strategic frameworks based on her experiences. Nari led combat training that incorporated human-style improvisation. The coalition military had created a new division, Adaptive Combat Integration. Its symbol was simple, a single human figure standing against impossible odds. Earth's status in the coalition had changed dramatically. Applications from humans to military and scientific programs increased exponentially. Other species began requesting human advisors for missions that required creative problem-solving. Trade agreements improved. Humanity was no longer seen as the weak newcomers, but as the species that brought a vital new perspective. Gina received messages from across coalition space. Young humans who had been told they couldn't do something, couldn't be something, wrote to thank her for proving it was possible. Alien warriors wrote to ask about her techniques. Human cadets had gathered, watching one of their own do something impossible. Alien Insta Hour 55. Gina stood on the bridge of a starship. It was massive, detailed down to every button and screen. Around her, crew members worked at their stations, all holographic but impossibly real. Through the viewport, she could see a fleet of enemy ships approaching. A tactical display appeared before her. The situation was clear and terrible. Her ship carried 300 civilian refugees. Nearby, a coalition military vessel carried her squad, 12 soldiers she had trained with for 3 years. The enemy fleet was moments from attacking. Her ship's engines were damaged. She could either run and save the civilians, leaving her squad to die, or stay and fight alongside her squad, which would result in the civilians being captured and killed by the enemy. The objective text appeared: choose. You have 5 minutes. This was the impossible choice scenario, the test that broke most cadets. There was no right answer, only loss. The simulation was testing how she handled moral failure, how she lived with impossible decisions. Gina studied the tactical display. 300 civilians, 12 soldiers, 5 minutes. An enemy fleet too powerful to defeat. The simulation expected her to calculate value, to weigh numbers, to make the cold logical choice, or the heroic emotional one. Either way, she would lose people she was supposed to protect. Either way, she would fail. But Gina looked at the scenario and saw something else. She saw a simulation designed by beings who thought in binary choices: win or lose, live or die, this or that. Human minds didn't work that way. What if I don't choose? She said aloud. Her crew looked at her, confused. One of them, a holographic officer, spoke up. Commander, we need a decision. The enemy will be in firing range in 4 minutes. Gina started working the tactical console. Divert all power from weapons to engines, including life support reserve. Give me everything. Commander, that will only give us 30 seconds of extra speed. It won't be enough to escape. I'm not trying to escape, Gina said. She was calculating trajectories, running numbers in her head. I'm going to ram the civilian ship into the enemy flagship. The crew stared at her. That will kill everyone aboard. No, Gina said, her fingers flying across controls. Because first we're evacuating all civilians to the military ship using life pods. Fast launch. No safety checks. Just get them off. She pulled up the life pod controls. We have 200 pods. 300 people. Tight fit, but possible. Commander, the enemy will shoot down the pods. Not if we use the civilian ship as a distraction. We pointed at their flagship on a collision course. They'll focus all fire on the ship, not the pods. The military vessel uses that window to get behind the enemy formation. That's not tactically sound. We'd be abandoning the civilian ship. It's already dead, Gina said. Engines damaged, no weapons, no chance. But it can still be useful. She started launching life pods, sending civilians streaming toward the military ship in hundreds of tiny crafts. The military ship has defensive weapons. It can protect the pods once they're aboard. Then it runs while the enemy is distracted. The holographic officer frowned. And your squad? Comes with us on the civilian ship. 12 people can fit in the command shuttle. We set the ship's collision course, then evacuate ourselves at the last second. The enemy won't see one small shuttle leaving while they're trying to stop a massive ship from ramming them. There was a pause. The simulation was calculating. This wasn't how the scenario was supposed to work. There weren't supposed to be loopholes, but Gina had found one. Executing plan, she said. The next 4 minutes were chaos. Life pods launched in waves. The civilian ship turned toward the enemy flagship, accelerating on its suicide run. The enemy fleet opened fire, trying to destroy it before impact. The military ship maneuvered behind the enemy formation, its guns protecting the tiny life pods. Gina and her squad ran to the command shuttle. They launched just as the civilian ship was seconds from collision. The explosion was massive, taking out the enemy flagship and scattering their formation. The military ship, now carrying all the refugees and the life pods, jumped to hyperspace. Everyone survived. In the observation area, silence fell like a weight. One instructor tried to speak. She wasn't supposed to be able to. The scenario requires a moral choice, another said. She didn't make one. She refused the premise of the test. Taman was laughing, nearly crying. She found a third option. The simulation gave her A or B, and she invented C. Forath stepped closer to his screen. His expression was unreadable. The simulation is recalculating again. This has never happened before. No cadet has ever completed that scenario with 0 casualties. Inside the crucible, Gina was breathing hard. The simulated explosion had felt terrifyingly real. But she was alive. Her squad was alive. The civilians were alive. A new message appeared. Error. Scenario parameters violated, recalculating. For a moment, the entire simulation froze. Then it glitched again, harder this time. The starship bridge flickered, showing glimpses of the chamber beneath. Colors inverted. Sounds distorted. What's happening? Nari asked urgently. The technician was frantically checking systems. The simulation's adaptive algorithm it's having trouble. It's trying to generate a scenario that Cadet Park can't solve, but it's running out of parameters. It's never had to work this hard before. Is she in danger? Ambassador Do-Hyun Lim asked sharply. No. The safety systems are still functional. But the simulation itself is struggling. Hour 60. The simulation stabilized. Gina now stood in an arena. It was circular, surrounded by high walls. The sky above was dark and starless. This was the final challenge. A figure materialized across from her. It was humanoid but massive, at least 3 meters tall. Its body was covered in armor that shifted and adapted. In its hands were weapons that looked like they could cut through steel. This was the architect, the final boss of the Crucible. The objective appeared. Defeat the architect. You have 12 hours, but there was something else. A smaller message below. Alternative, surrender with honor. You have proven yourself. There is no shame in withdrawal. The simulation was offering her an out. She had lasted 60 hours. Far longer than any human should have. She had solved scenarios in ways that weren't supposed to be possible. She had earned respect. She could stop now. Yield with honor. Gina looked at the architect. It was designed to be unbeatable in combat. It was faster, stronger, more skilled. It had perfect tactics and unlimited stamina. Fighting it directly was suicide. She smiled. No surrender, she said quietly. The architect moved. Gina ran. She wasn't trying to fight it. Not directly. The arena had obstacles, pillars, barriers. She used all of them. The architect was powerful but large. She was small and could fit through gaps it couldn't. When it got close, she didn't engage. She dodged, rolled, scrambled away. The architect's weapons carved through stone pillars like paper, but Gina was never where it expected. She was using the destroyed obstacles, turning rubble into temporary shields and climbing surfaces. Hour 62. Gina was bleeding from a dozen cuts. The architect had landed several glancing blows. Each one felt real, sent real pain through her body. But she kept moving. She noticed something. The architect was learning her patterns, yes. But it was programmed to win fights. It was waiting for her to attack so it could counter. It expected combat. She refused to give it that hour 64. Gina stopped running. She stood in the center of the arena, exhausted, swaying on her feet. The architect approached, weapons raised. Why do you persist? It asked. Its voice was deep and artificial. You cannot win. You are injured, tired, human. You have already proven more than anyone expected. There is no dishonor in stopping. Gina looked up at it. Blood ran down her face from a cut above her eye. Her smile was tired but genuine. You're right, she said. I can't beat you in a fight. You're stronger, faster, better trained. She took a breath. But that's not what I'm trying to do. Then what? I'm trying to last, Gina said. The objective is to defeat you. But it doesn't say how. It doesn't say I have to fight you. I just have to last 12 hours. And I've already lasted 8. The architect paused. It was calculating, trying to understand. So I'm not going to fight you, Gina continued. I'm just going to keep running. Keep dodging. Keep surviving. For 4 more hours. Because that's what humans do. We don't have to be the strongest. We just have to last longer than the problem. The architect stood motionless. It was programmed to combat, to tactics, to victory. But it had no programming for an opponent who refused to fight, who redefined victory as simple survival. Hour 68. Gina was delirious. She was talking to herself in Korean. Nonsense words mixed with laughter. She could barely walk straight. But she was still moving, still dodging, still surviving. The architect followed her, but its movements had changed. It was no longer attacking with full force. It seemed confused, uncertain. This wasn't how the scenario was supposed to go. Hour 70. 2 hours remained. Gina collapsed against a wall. She couldn't feel her legs anymore. Everything hurt. She was beyond exhaustion, running on something else, stubbornness maybe, or spite. The architect stood over her. You should yield. Your body is failing. Probably, Gina agreed. Her voice was hoarse. 2 more hours, though. You cannot last you. Hour 18. Gina had been in the crucible for 18 hours and she was still going. In the observation area, the crowd had grown. Word had spread throughout the station. A human was not only attempting the crucible but surviving it. Taman hadn't left his monitor. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he refused to look away. Her vitals are holding steady, he reported to anyone who would listen. Heart rate elevated but manageable. She's exhausted but not breaking. Nari stood beside him, equally tired. How is she doing this? She's smarter than the simulation expects, Taman said. Every time it throws something at her, she finds a way around instead of through. Inside the crucible, Gina was navigating a new environment. The jungle had disappeared, replaced by a frozen wasteland. The temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. She had no cold weather gear, no shelter, and a new objective was displayed in her vision. Cross the ice plains. Reach the extraction point. You have 12 hours. The cold was brutal. Gina knew it wasn't real, but her body couldn't tell the difference. She shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering. The simulation was attacking her biology now, testing how long a human could survive in conditions designed for species with natural cold resistance. She couldn't just walk across the plains. She would freeze before making it halfway. She needed to think differently. Gina examined her surroundings. The wasteland wasn't completely empty. There were rock formations, ice structures, and the frozen corpses of large creatures half buried in snow. She recognized the strategy. Use the environment. She began moving from rock to rock, using them as windbreaks. When she found the frozen creature, she used her knife to cut into it, crawling inside the frozen cavity to block the wind. It was disgusting, even knowing it was simulated, but it worked. Her body temperature stabilized. She rested for 30 minutes, then continued. Progress was slow but steady. Every few hours she found another frozen creature or ice cave to shelter in. The simulation had expected her to rush, to try to cross quickly before freezing. Instead, she turned the crossing into a series of short, manageable segments. In the observation area, an instructor named Soren spoke up. She's adapting her strategy to her limitations. Instead of fighting her biology, she's working within it. Vorath nodded slowly. The simulation is learning this. It will adjust. Hour 24. A full day had passed. Gina reached the extraction point where a shuttle waited to take her to the next challenge. She climbed aboard, her body shaking from cold and exhaustion. The shuttle lifted off and warm air flooded the cabin. She let herself rest for a few minutes as the shuttle flew, but rest never lasted long in the crucible. The shuttle's control panel lit up with warnings. Enemy ships were approaching. A new objective appeared. Defend the shuttle. Survive the attack. You have 30 minutes. Gina moved to the pilot's seat. The controls were designed for 6 armed species. She couldn't operate them the way they were intended, so she didn't try. Instead, she put the shuttle into autopilot and moved to the cargo bay. There she found emergency supplies. Flares, magnetic clamps, spare fuel cells. Not weapons, but tools. Gina smiled grimly and got to work. When the enemy ships attacked, they expected the shuttle to defend itself with weapon systems. Instead, Gina opened the cargo bay doors and released everything she'd prepared. Fuel cells rigged to explode, magnetic clamps that attached to enemy hulls, flares that confused their sensors. It was chaos, messy and improvised, but it worked. The enemy ships scattered, unable to track the shuttle through the confusion. Gina sealed the cargo bay and returned to the pilot's seat, guiding the shuttle to land on a desert planet below. Outside, Taman was laughing in disbelief. She turned cargo supplies into weapons. She just made it up as she went. That's not standard doctrine, an alien instructor said, sounding bothered. No, Vorath said quietly. It is not. Hour 30. Gina stood on the desert planet, where the temperature was now dangerously hot instead of cold. The simulation was testing her range, pushing her from one extreme to another. A new objective appeared. Navigate the maze. Find the exit. You have 8 hours. The maze was enormous, walls of stone rising 10 meters high. It stretched in every direction, a puzzle designed to test spatial reasoning and memory. Most species relied on mental mapping or technological aid. Gina had neither advantage. She stood at the entrance and thought, The aliens who designed this would think in certain patterns. They would build mazes that made sense to their psychology. But human brains work differently. Gina didn't try to map the maze. Instead, she started marking walls with stones, creating a trail. She moved quickly but carefully, always marking where she'd been. When she hit dead ends, she backtracked without frustration. When the maze seemed to loop, she adjusted her strategy. The simulation had never encountered this approach. It tried to confuse her by shifting walls, but she noticed the changes because her stone markers moved. The maze was adapting, but so was she. Hour 35. Gina found the exit. She emerged from the maze covered in dust. Her lips cracked from the heat, but still moving, still surviving. The next challenge was already waiting. Hour 40. Gina faced a tactical scenario. Holographic soldiers surrounded a hostage situation. The objective was simple: rescue the hostages. Neutralize the threats. You have 2 hours. This was a combat scenario designed for warriors. Keltharians would use superior strength. Vryn would use coordinated tactics. Other species had natural abilities that made combat easier. Gina had none of those advantages. She was a small human with basic training and a knife. She studied the situation from a distance. The enemy soldiers were positioned logically, covering all obvious approaches. The hostages were held in the center of a compound. Any direct assault would fail, so Gina didn't assault. She waited until nightfall in the simulation, then used the darkness to her advantage. She moved like a shadow, patient and slow. When she reached the compound's outer wall, she didn't climb over. She dug under it using her knife and bare hands to create a tunnel. It took 90 minutes. It was exhausting, painful work. But when she emerged inside the compound, she was behind enemy lines. The soldiers never saw her coming. She freed the hostages quietly, one by one, leading them back through the tunnel. Only when the last hostage was safe did she collapse the tunnel entrance, trapping the enemy soldiers inside their own compound. In the observation area, silence fell. An instructor finally spoke. That was not how this scenario is supposed to be solved. She avoided combat entirely. Another added. The scenario is called Combat Rescue. She completed the objective, Soren pointed out. The hostages are safe. That's what matters. Foreth studied the screen intently. The simulation is recalculating. It has never encountered a participant who refuses to engage in the scenario as designed. Hour 45. Gina received a new objective, but before she could read it, the environment glitched. For a moment, the simulation flickered, showing the walls of the chamber beneath. Then it stabilized. What was that? Taman asked urgently. A technician checked the systems. The simulation's adaptive algorithm is working overtime. It's trying to generate scenarios faster than normal because the standard progression isn't working. It's never had to do this before. Is she breaking it? Nari asked, sounding both worried and impressed. No, the technician said, but she's definitely pushing it to its limits. Inside the crucible, Gina was now standing in a city under siege. Explosions echoed in the distance. The sky was filled with smoke and fire. Her new objective appeared. Lead the evacuation. Save as many civilians as possible. You have 4 hours. This was a leadership scenario, testing command decisions under pressure. It was designed to be overwhelming, to force impossible choices. Gina looked at the chaos around her and felt the weight of it. Simulated civilians were running in panic. Buildings were collapsing. Enemy forces were advancing. She couldn't save everyone. That was the lesson of this scenario. Leaders had to make hard choices. They had to accept losses. But Gina looked at the situation and thought, what if I don't accept that? She started organizing. She grabbed panicking civilians and gave them tasks. You help the injured. You guide people to that building. You gather supplies. She turned the victims into helpers, multiplying her effectiveness. When enemy forces appeared, she didn't fight them. She used the civilians to create diversions, sent them running in different directions, making it impossible for the enemy to track everyone. It was messy and chaotic, but it worked. She found a damaged building and realized it could be collapsed to block the main road, slowing the enemy advance. She sent people to gather explosives from destroyed vehicles and rig the building. When it fell, it bought precious time. Hour 48. The evacuation was nearly complete. Gina had saved far more civilians than the scenario designers thought possible. She hadn't accepted the hard choices. She'd found ways to avoid them. As the last transport lifted off, Gina collapsed against a wall. Her body was screaming for rest. Every muscle ached. Her throat was dry. The simulated injuries felt absolutely real, but she had 48 hours behind her. 24 hours ahead. She was halfway through. The timer showed 24 wang. 1 day remaining. In the observation area, the crowd had grown to over 100 people. The week passed too quickly. Gina spent her days preparing as best she could. She reviewed combat techniques, studied past crucible attempts, and trained until her muscles ached. Taman helped her analyze the limited data available on the simulation. Nari ran combat drills with her every morning, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The crucible was designed to be unbeatable. That was the point. On the morning of the trial, Gina woke early. She ate a simple breakfast, drank water, and tied her hair back. Her hands were steady. She felt calm in a way that surprised her. Perhaps it was acceptance. She would probably fail, but at least she would try. The walk to Simulation Chamber 1 took 15 minutes. With each step, Gina noticed more people watching. Word had spread quickly that a human was attempting the crucible. Some students looked curious. Others looked pitying. A few looked amused, like they were about to watch entertainment. Outside the chamber, Taman was waiting. His face was tight with worry. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Nobody expects you to." "I know," Gina replied. "Vorath is inside. So are about 20 other instructors. They're all here to watch." Taman hesitated. "Gina, they're expecting you to fail fast. Some of them are making bets on how long you'll last. The average guess is 4 hours," Gina smiled. "Then I should try for 5. Nari appeared from around the corner, slightly out of breath. "I had to run from the training hall. I wanted to see you before you went in." She grabbed Gina's shoulders, looking her straight in the eyes. "Listen, you're tough. Tougher than any of these aliens think. Whatever happens in there, remember that we're watching. All the humans are watching. You're not just doing this for yourself." The weight of those words settled on Gina's shoulders. She nodded slowly. "I'll do my best." "I know you will," Nari said. "That's what scares them." The chamber door opened. Instructor Vorath stood in the entrance, his 6 arms crossed. "Cadet Park, it is time." Gina took a deep breath and walked inside. The simulation chamber was enormous, at least 50 meters in every direction. The walls were smooth and metallic, covered with sensors and projection equipment. In the center of the room was a single platform. Standing near it was a medical team, ready to intervene if the simulation caused physical harm. It could do that, Gina knew. The crucible was known to cause real injuries through neural feedback. Around the edges of the chamber, observation windows showed at least 30 faces watching. More than Taman had said. News had spread even further. Gina recognized several senior instructors, military officials, even Ambassador Do-Yun Lim from Earth's diplomatic mission. The pressure was immense. Vorath gestured to the platform. "Step onto the marker. The simulation will begin immediately. You may exit at any time by speaking the word yield. Your vital signs will be monitored. If you are in danger of permanent harm, we will extract you." "I understand, sir." "Cadet Park," Vorath said, his voice softer than usual. "There's no shame in attempting something beyond your capability. You have already shown courage by coming here." Gina met his 3-eyed gaze. "Thank you, sir. But I didn't come here for courage. I came here to pass." Something flickered in Vorath's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or concern. He stepped back. "Begin when ready." Gina stepped onto the platform. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She thought about Earth, about her brother, about every person who said humans were too weak for this galaxy. Then she opened her eyes. "I'm ready." The chamber disappeared. Gina found herself standing in a jungle. The air was hot and thick, filled with strange sounds. Above her, 3 moons hung in an alien sky. She knew none of this was real, that she was still standing in the chamber, but her brain couldn't tell the difference. The simulation was perfect. A holographic display appeared in front of her eyes, visible only to her. It showed a timer 72 hours. 3 full days. The timer began counting down. Text scrolled across her vision. "Survive. Adapt. Complete objectives as they appear. This is the crucible. Prove your worth." The text faded. Gina was alone. She took stock of her situation. She was wearing standard combat gear. A basic knife hung at her belt. No other weapons, no supplies. That was expected. The crucible provided nothing. She needed shelter, water, and information. In that order, Gina started moving through the jungle, careful to step quietly. She didn't know what threats existed here yet, but she knew they would come. The crucible always started relatively easy and got harder as it learned about the participant. An hour passed. Gina found a stream and drank carefully, knowing the simulation would make her feel thirst and hunger as if they were real. She climbed a tall tree to get a view of the area. In the distance, she could see what looked like ancient ruins. Her first objective appeared. Reach the temple. Retrieve the data core. You have 6 hours. Gina climbed down and started moving toward the ruins. The jungle was dense, filled with plants that seemed to shift and move. Several times she heard sounds of large creatures nearby. She avoided them when she could. Outside the simulation, Taman watched on a monitor in the observation area. She's being smart, he muttered. Not rushing. Conserving energy. Next to him, Nari nodded. She knows she can't overpower anything in there. She has to outsmart it. Vorith stood nearby, his arms crossed. He was watching intently. The simulation has not yet adapted to her. It is treating her as it would any cadet. That will change. 3 hours into the trial, Gina reached the ruins. They were massive, clearly built by a civilization long dead. Stone structures rose toward the sky, covered in vines and strange symbols. She could feel the simulation watching her, learning from her choices. The entrance to the temple was guarded. 3 robotic sentries stood in front of the door, each armed with energy weapons. They were designed for species much larger and faster than humans. A Keltharian might fight them directly. A Vryn might hack their systems. Gina studied the situation carefully. She couldn't fight them. She didn't have the equipment to hack them. But she noticed something. The sentries were programmed to respond to movement in front of the door. Their sensors pointed forward. She spent 20 minutes gathering stones from the ruins. Then she climbed to a high vantage point and began throwing them, creating noises from different directions. The sentries turned to investigate each sound, their sensors sweeping away from the door. While they were distracted, Gina moved. She didn't go through the front entrance. She found a collapsed section of wall on the side of the temple and squeezed through. It was tight, painful, and required her to move like water through the narrow gap. A larger species couldn't have managed it. She was inside. In the observation area, one of the instructors leaned forward. Did she just avoid the combat encounter entirely? She exploited the scenario design, another instructor said. That's not how this is supposed to work. Vorath said nothing, but his eyes remained fixed on the screen. Gina moved through the temple, navigating traps and puzzles designed to test spatial reasoning and quick reflexes. She was slower than the simulation expected, but she was methodical. She made few mistakes. 6 hours into the trial, she reached the temple's center. There on a pedestal was the data core she needed to retrieve. But standing between her and the pedestal was a new challenge. A holographic warrior appeared. It was massive, armed with weapons, fast and deadly. The simulation had adapted. This warrior was designed specifically to counter human limitations. It could track her movements perfectly. It would not be distracted by stones. Gina stood at the entrance to the chamber, looking at the warrior. Her objective was clear: retrieve the data core. But to do that, she would have to get past something designed to kill her. She took a deep breath. Then, inexplicably, she smiled. Outside, Taman saw her expression on the monitor. That's her dangerous smile. What does that mean? An alien instructor asked. It means, Nari said quietly, she's got an idea. Gina didn't fight the warrior. Instead, she ran. She sprinted into the chamber, dove under the warrior's first attack, and rolled toward the pedestal. The warrior was fast, but it was programmed to guard, not to predict chaos. She grabbed the data core and kept running, heading for a window high on the chamber wall. The warrior pursued, its weapons firing. One blast hit near her, and she felt real pain surge through her shoulder. But she didn't stop. Gina jumped, caught the window ledge, and pulled herself up with all her strength. Behind her, the warrior couldn't follow. It was too large for the window. She was outside on the temple roof, 6 hours into the crucible. Her shoulder throbbed with simulated pain. But she had completed the first objective. The timer read 66 Mao Mi Wong, 66 hours remaining. This was just the beginning. The lecture hall was massive, built to hold students from 47 different species. Gina Park sat in the back row, her small frame almost hidden between a towering Keltharian warrior and a crystalline being that hummed with electric energy. She was used to feeling small here. Humans always were. Station Kepler 7 floated in neutral space far from any star system. It was home to the Galactic Military Academy, where the best soldiers from across the Coalition came to train. Gina had been here for 3 years now. 3 years of being told she was too weak, too slow, too fragile. 3 years of proving them wrong one day at a time. Instructor Vorath stood at the front of the hall. He was Keltharian, which meant he had 6 arms, 3 eyes, and skin that looked like polished stone. He had fought in the border wars and led armies across 12 star systems. When he spoke, even the proudest students listened. "Today we discuss your final trial," Vorath said. His voice was deep and echoed through the hall. The Crucible. The room fell silent. Every student knew that name. The Crucible was legend, the final test before graduation. It was also the most failed test in Academy history. The Crucible is a combat simulation, Vorath continued. It lasts 72 hours. It tests everything you have learned here. Strength, strategy, endurance, will. He paused, his 3 eyes scanning the room. In 400 years, only 89 cadets have passed. The success rate is 0.03%. Gina watched as students shifted nervously in their seats. Next to her, Taemin Choi had gone pale. He was her closest friend here, one of only 12 humans in the entire program. He was brilliant with tactics and planning, but physical trials terrified him. "Most of you will fail," Vorath said flatly. "This is expected. This is acceptable. The Crucible is designed to find the exceptional among the already excellent." One of the Keltharian students raised an arm. "Instructor, what happens if we fail?" "You will graduate with standard honors," Vorath replied. "You will serve the Coalition with distinction. But you will not be marked as elite. You will not lead. You will not shape the future of military doctrine." His eyes swept the room again. "You will be ordinary." For warrior species, ordinary was an insult. Gina saw several students straighten in their seats, determination hardening their features. "The simulation adapts," Vorath continued. "It learns your weaknesses and exploits them. It creates scenarios designed specifically to break you. Most cadets fail within 6 hours." He tapped a control panel and a hologram appeared above his head. It showed statistics, data, success rates broken down by species. Gina studied the hologram. Keltharians had the highest pass rate at 0.1%. The Vryn, a species of strategic geniuses, came next. Humans were not listed. Not a single human had ever attempted the Crucible. "As you can see," Vorath said, "certain species are more suited to this trial than others. Biology matters. Heritage matters. Some of you come from warrior cultures spanning thousands of years. You have evolved for combat, for strategy, for survival under extreme conditions." His middle eye focused on the back row, on the humans. "And some of you," he said slowly, "come from a species that has been part of the Coalition for only 15 years. A species with no enhanced biology, no warrior heritage, no evolutionary advantages." Taemin sank lower in his seat. On Gina's other side, Nari Kwan, the only other human female in the program, clenched her fists. Nari was a combat specialist, one of the best in hand-to-hand fighting, but even she looked worried. "I say this not to discourage," Vorath continued, "but to be realistic. The Crucible was designed by and for species with capabilities beyond human baseline. For a human to attempt it would be..." He paused, searching for the word. "Impossible." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Gina felt something stir inside her chest. It was familiar, this feeling. She had felt it when human ships first met the Coalition, and everyone said humanity was too primitive. She had felt it when she applied to the Academy, and they said she would never be accepted. She had felt it every time an instructor assumed she would fail. She had felt it all her life, and it had never stopped her yet. "That's not fair," Taemin whispered beside her. "He can't just say humans can't do it." "He just did," Nari muttered. "And he's probably right. No offense, but we're not built like them." Gina said nothing. She was watching Vorath, watching the way he stood so certain, so absolutely sure that humans were limited. She thought about her brother, Hyun, back on Earth. Before she left for the Academy, he had asked her a question. "Will they ever see us as equals?" She had promised him she would make them. "The trial begins in 1 week, Vorath announced. Those who wish to attempt it must register by tomorrow. Choose wisely," There is no shame in knowing your limits. Students began filing out of the hall talking in hushed voices. Some looked excited. Most looked afraid. Taman stood up quickly, eager to leave. Nari followed him. Gina remained seated. She was thinking, calculating, considering. The crucible adapted to its participants. It learned weaknesses. It was designed for species stronger and faster than humans. Everything Vorath said was true, but he had made one mistake. He assumed impossible meant the same thing to humans as it did to everyone else. Gina stood up. She reached back and gathered her long black hair, pulling it into a tight ponytail. It was something she did before every challenge, every test, every moment that mattered. It was her ritual, her preparation, her declaration of intent. She walked down the steps toward the front of the hall. Her footsteps were soft but steady. Other students moved aside, not really noticing her. She was used to that too. Vorath was gathering his materials, preparing to leave. He looked up as Gina approached, his 3 eyes registering mild surprise. "Cadet Park," he said. "Do you have a question?" "No, sir," Gina replied. Her voice was calm, steady. "I want to register for the Crucible." Vorath stared at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, he set down his data tablet. "Cadet, perhaps you misunderstood. I said the trial is impossible for humans." "I understood perfectly, sir." "Then you understand you will fail." "Maybe," Gina said. She smiled, a small, quiet smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I'd like to try anyway." Vorath studied her face, searching for something. Bravado, perhaps, foolishness, pride. He seemed confused when he found none of those things, just calm determination and that small, inexplicable smile. "You will embarrass yourself," he said finally. "You will embarrass your species." "Or," Gina said softly, "I won't." They stood there, human and alien, separated by biology and culture and 400 years of academy tradition. Vorath could have refused. He could have said humans were not allowed, but the rules said any cadet could attempt the Crucible. "Very well," he said. "Report to Simulation Chamber 1 in 1 week. Bring nothing. Expect everything." "Yes, sir." Gina turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Vorath mutter something in his own language. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. He thought she was foolish. He thought she would fail quickly and completely. Maybe he was right. Maybe the Crucible really was impossible for someone like her. But Gina had learned something important in her 3 years at the academy. The galaxy was full of people who would tell you what you couldn't do, what you weren't built for, what was impossible. The trick was to smile and do it anyway,